The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the small town of Miller's Creek. Once a bustling community, it now wore a weary face, boarded windows, silent streets, and abandoned cars rusting by the roadside. People had left, fleeing rumors and terror, but some remained. Ordinary people who didn't know they were about to become heroes. Amelia Turner tightened her grip on the baseball bat, the worn leather handle creaking faintly under her fingers. Her eyes darted nervously from one broken window to the next as she moved down Main Street, searching for supplies. Her heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the cold knowledge that something was wrong. The radio static that filled the small battery-powered device in her pocket had gone silent for days. No news. No warnings. Just an eerie hush. Her friend Marcus, a former firefighter with steady hands and a calm voice, kept close behind her, clutching a crowbar. Together, they made an unlikely team, two ordinary people caught in the growing chaos. Just last week, they had been neighbors sharing coffee, laughing over small-town stories. Now, survival was their only goal. "Did you hear that?" Amelia whispered suddenly, freezing in place. Marcus shook his head, listening intently. The wind shifted, carrying a faint, guttural groan from the alleyway nearby. "No way," Marcus muttered, eyes wide. The groan grew louder, more desperate, and then a figure staggered into view, its clothes torn, skin pale and mottled, eyes glazed with hunger. Amelia's breath hitched. This was no ordinary person. This was a creature from nightmares, a walking corpse, the beginning of the rising threat. The infected had arrived in Miller's Creek. No one was truly prepared. Panic had spread like wildfire, turning friends into foes and neighbors into enemies. The government's failure to contain the outbreak had left the town vulnerable, and soon the dead would outnumber the living. Amelia swung her bat with all her might, the crack echoing as it connected with the creature's skull. It collapsed, but more emerged from the shadows, drawn by the noise. Marcus raised his crowbar, shouting, "Run!" They sprinted down the street, adrenaline fueling their escape. Behind them, guttural snarls and pounding footsteps followed relentlessly. Reaching the safety of the old community center, Amelia slammed the door shut and barred it with a heavy metal rod. The air was thick with fear and sweat. Breathing hard, she looked around at the small group gathered inside, faces etched with terror, hands gripping makeshift weapons. Among them was Sarah, a nurse with fierce determination in her eyes, and Luis, a mechanic whose skills might be the group's only hope at fortifying their shelter. "We need a plan," Sarah said, voice steady but urgent. "If those things are here, we won't last long without defenses." Luis nodded. "I can rig some traps around the perimeter, but we need more supplies and weapons." Amelia swallowed hard. "And what about outside? The radio's been dead for days. No help is coming." Marcus shook his head grimly. "We can't wait for rescue. We have to fight back." Outside, the groans grew louder, a chilling reminder that time was running out. The town of Miller's Creek was no longer safe. It was a battlefield, and the ordinary people trapped within its borders had only two choices: succumb or stand and fight. That night, under a sky streaked with smoke and ash, a new resolve began to take shape among the survivors. Amelia, Marcus, Sarah, and Luis weren't heroes, not yet. They were just ordinary people, scared and uncertain. But soon, everything would change. The first stand in Dead America was about to begin. Would you like me to keep writing part 2 next? Or do you want the full 10-part outline first? Just let me know. Part 2, Into the Shadows. The first rays of dawn filtered weakly through the cracked windows of the community center. The survivors inside stirred quietly, their faces pale, eyes heavy with exhaustion but sharpened by the looming threat beyond the walls. Amelia sat cross-legged on a battered wooden bench, her baseball bat resting beside her like a lifeline. She watched Marcus as he inspected a rusted lock on the back door. The soft click as it opened made her heart jump, not from relief, but from a new wave of fear. "What do you think, Marcus? How long before they break through?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Not long. These things don't get tired, Amelia. We're running out of time. The groans outside had grown from distant echoes to a maddening chorus. More infected roamed the streets, attracted by the noise and the scent of life. The survivors had barricaded every possible entrance, but their fortifications were makeshift, old tables, crates, and scrap metal. It was a fragile defense against an unrelenting enemy. Sarah approached, her nurse's bag slung over one shoulder. I found some bandages and painkillers in the pharmacy, she reported, but not nearly enough. Luis joined them, wiping grease from his hands. I managed to get a few nails and some wire from the hardware store, he said, voice grim. I can make traps, but I'll need help setting them up. The small group nodded in silent agreement. Every minute counted. We'll need to scout for more supplies, Marcus said, pulling out a map of Miller's Creek from his jacket. But it's too risky during the day. The infected are everywhere. Amelia studied the map. There's an old fire station a few blocks away, she said slowly. Might be some gear left behind. Good, Marcus said. We'll move tonight. We take what we can carry and come straight back. The plan was simple but dangerous. As night fell, the survivors prepared themselves. Fear twisted in Amelia's stomach like a living thing, but beneath it was something new, determination. She was no longer just trying to survive, she was fighting for every breath, every heartbeat. The group slipped out into the darkness, weapons ready, eyes sharp. The streets were eerily silent, the only sound the crunch of broken glass beneath their boots. Shadows seemed to watch from every alley, every ruined doorway. At the fire station, the door hung ajar, a sinister invitation. Marcus pushed it open slowly. Inside, the smell of smoke and decay mingled with the cold night air. They moved cautiously, scavenging through old lockers and dusty shelves. Suddenly, a faint noise, a shuffling footstep, echoed from the back room. Amelia's heart raced. Stay alert, she hissed. From the shadows, a figure lunged, a woman, her clothes torn, her eyes wild but human. She stumbled toward them, desperation clear on her face. Help me, she gasped. They're coming, they've taken my family. Sarah immediately stepped forward. We'll get you safe. Who are you? The woman's name was Rachel, and she had been trapped in her home while the infected overran the town. Alone, scared, and running out of hope, she had decided to risk everything to find others. As the group made their way back, carrying Rachel and the salvaged supplies, the distant groans grew louder, closer. The infected had caught their scent. Run! Marcus shouted as several figures burst from the shadows, their rotten limbs reaching and grasping. Amelia swung her bat, connecting with a sickening thud. Nearby, Luis hurled a makeshift Molotov cocktail, flames roaring to life and forcing the creatures back. The group fled through narrow alleys, hearts pounding, lungs burning. Every step was a gamble between life and death. When they finally slammed the community center door shut behind them, relief washed over them, brief and fragile. Inside, Rachel collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. I thought I was going to die out there, she whispered. Amelia looked around at the faces surrounding her, ordinary people thrown into a nightmare they never imagined. Yet here they were, standing, fighting, refusing to give up. We can't keep running, Amelia said firmly. If this town is going to survive, we have to fight back. Marcus nodded. It's time to turn the tide. Outside, the night whispered with the sound of the undead, but inside the battered walls of the community center, a new force was rising, hope, fierce and unyielding. The morning sun barely penetrated the thick haze hanging over Miller's Creek. Inside the community center, the survivors gathered around a makeshift table, a collection of maps, notes, and scavenged weapons scattered across its surface. Amelia stood at the head of the group, her eyes fierce despite the exhaustion shadowing her face. Around her, Marcus, Sarah, Luis, and Rachel listened intently. The quiet hum of fear was always present, but today, something different stirred, a flicker of defiance. We can't wait for the infected to come to us, Amelia said, voice steady. We need to take control of the streets, even if just for a little while. Marcus nodded slowly. We'll need a distraction. Something to draw their attention away from the community center while we set traps and fortify our defenses. Luis tapped a finger on the map. There's an old gas station on 5th Avenue. If we can rig a fire there, it might pull them out. Sarah looked uneasy. It's risky. A fire could get out of control. It's a risk we have to take, Amelia said firmly. If we stay hidden and defensive, we'll be trapped. We have to fight. Rachel's hands trembled as she clutched her jacket. I want to help. I don't want to be scared anymore. Amelia smiled softly. Good. We'll need every pair of hands. The plan was set in motion as daylight faded again. While Luis and Marcus prepared the explosives, carefully assembling crude Molotov cocktails and setting timed fuses, Amelia, Sarah, and Rachel gathered makeshift weapons. The old baseball bat, crowbars, knives salvaged from the hardware store, and even sharpened sticks became their arsenal. The streets outside seemed to hold their breath, the usual groans and shuffles replaced by an eerie silence. Luis lit the fuse on the first Molotov and tossed it toward the gas station's fuel pumps. The explosion was immediate, a fiery roar that lit the night sky and sent shockwaves through the empty streets. From every direction, the infected emerged. Drawn by the noise and heat, they shuffled and snarled toward the fire, distracted but dangerous. Amelia and the others used this moment to move swiftly. Luis and Marcus rushed to the perimeter, setting traps, tripwires rigged to homemade explosives and sharpened stakes hidden beneath debris. Sarah tended to minor wounds and kept watch, while Rachel, though frightened, stood guard beside Amelia. The first wave of infected charged headlong into the traps. A loud explosion erupted, throwing several creatures into the air. Others fell onto stakes, their groans cut short. But more kept coming, relentless and unstoppable. Suddenly, a scream pierced the chaos. Rachel had been grabbed by a crawling infected, pulling her toward the darkened alley. Rachel! Amelia yelled, running toward her friend. With a fierce swing of her bat, she struck the creature, breaking its grip. Panting, Rachel looked up with wide eyes. Thank you. I thought I was done. Amelia gave her a brief nod. We're not done yet. The fire cast flickering shadows over the battle-scarred streets. The survivors fought with everything they had, but the tide was overwhelming. Amelia knew they couldn't hold forever. We need to fall back. Marcus shouted, urgency in his voice. The fire's spreading too fast. Smoke thickened, choking the air and forcing them to retreat. The infected, though hindered by flames, continued their advance. Back at the community center, the survivors collapsed inside, coughing and gasping for breath. The fire raged outside, a blazing beacon against the night, but the cost was clear. Several traps had been damaged, and their ammunition was running low. Amelia wiped soot from her face, eyes scanning the group. We bought ourselves time, she said. But it's not enough. Sarah stepped forward, holding a small bag of medicine. Some of us are getting sick. This virus isn't just killing, it's changing people. We need answers, and fast. Luis clenched his fists. The town's hospital is our next stop. If there's anything left, we have to find it. Marcus looked at Amelia, hope and fear mingling in his gaze. We're ordinary people, Amelia. But maybe that's our greatest strength. We're not soldiers. We're survivors. Amelia's jaw set. Then let's show them what that means. Outside, the fire's glow dimmed as dawn approached, but inside the battered walls, a new fire burned, a fierce resolve to stand, to fight, and to survive in the face of darkness. The last stand in Dead America was just beginning. Let me know when you want me to continue with Part 4. The early morning mist clung to the deserted streets of Miller's Creek as Amelia, Marcus, Luis, Sarah, and Rachel prepared to leave the relative safety of the community center. The fire from last night had scorched a large part of the eastern block, leaving the town scarred and smoke swirling in the cold air. Luis tightened the straps on his makeshift backpack, heavy with tools and supplies scavenged from the hardware store. Sarah checked the medical kit again, ensuring that bandages, painkillers, and antiseptics were packed tightly. "This is it," Marcus said quietly, glancing at the cracked map spread between them. "The hospital. It's the only place left that might have what we need to fight back against this." Rachel swallowed hard. "I've never been inside. It's always been too dangerous." Amelia's eyes hardened. "Dangerous or not, we don't have a choice. We either find help or we fall here." The group slipped out into the shadows, hearts pounding as they moved through the broken streets. Every creak and whisper of wind seemed amplified in the tense silence. Their footsteps were soft, careful, but the threat lurking in the darkness never felt far away. As they neared the hospital, the building loomed like a hollow giant, its windows shattered, doors hanging off hinges. The scent of decay and antiseptic mixed with something far worse, the unmistakable stench of death. Marcus led the way, crowbar ready to force open any barriers. The front entrance gave way with a shuddering groan, and the survivors stepped inside, eyes adjusting to the dim light filtering through the dust-choked air. The silence was suffocating, broken only by distant drips of water and the faint hum of broken machinery. Rows of empty beds stretched into darkness, abandoned tools and syringes scattered across cracked floors. Sarah moved cautiously, calling out softly, "Is anyone here? We need help." No answer came, only the echo of their voices. Luis found a stash of supplies in a storage room, canned food, bottled water, and, most importantly, a small cache of antibiotics and antiviral drugs. Hope flickered briefly. But then a low growl reverberated through the halls. From the shadows emerged a group of infected, their eyes glazed and teeth bared. "Run!" Amelia shouted as the creatures charged. The survivors scattered, dodging overturned equipment and debris. Amelia swung her bat, striking down one of the infected before pulling Rachel out of the way of a snapping jaw. Marcus and Luis fought back to back, wielding crowbars and pipes, each hit met with sickening crunches. Sarah, though terrified, helped Amelia drag a wounded survivor they'd found earlier, a man named Paul, bitten but still breathing. The group retreated deeper into the hospital, heartbeats pounding like war drums. They found themselves in the research wing, where papers and notebooks lay strewn across overturned tables. Sarah flipped through the pages, eyes widening. "Look at this," she said breathlessly. "There were experiments here, attempts to understand the virus. There's data on infection rates and possible treatments. But it was never finished." Amelia's gaze hardened. "We're not just fighting monsters. We're fighting an unknown enemy, and the only way out is through." Suddenly, the power flickered, plunging the hospital into darkness. The hum of fluorescent lights died, replaced by eerie silence. From the shadows, something moved, a sound deeper and more guttural than before. "Stay close," Marcus commanded. A hulking figure emerged, larger and faster than the other infected. Its skin hung in patches, muscles exposed, eyes burning with unnatural intelligence. Amelia felt a chill. This was no ordinary infected, it was something worse. The creature lunged. Amelia swung her bat with all her strength, but the monster caught it mid-air and crushed the wood like paper. Marcus charged, crowbar raised, and with a shout, struck the creature's side. The beast roared and backed away, disappearing into the darkness. Breathing heavily, the group regrouped. "We need to get out," Luis said. "Now." As they made their way toward the emergency exit, Sarah clutched the research notes tightly. "This might be the key," she said. "We need to understand what we're dealing with." Outside, the hospital loomed against the breaking dawn, a fortress of secrets and danger. The survivors didn't speak much on the way back. Their minds were filled with questions and a growing fear that the world they once knew was gone forever. But beneath it all was a spark, a fragile hope that ordinary people could still make a difference, even when faced with the rising darkness. The last stand in Dead America was becoming more than a fight for survival. It was a fight for the future. The sun was sinking behind the ruined skyline of Miller's Creek, casting long shadows over the battered community center. Inside, the survivors gathered once more around the worn wooden table, the hospital's research notes spread out before them like a fragile map to salvation or destruction. Sarah's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the weight of what she'd discovered. The virus isn't just a mindless infection, she explained. It's adaptive. It mutates quickly, learning how to overcome immune responses. That thing we saw in the hospital, it wasn't a normal infected. It's evolved. Marcus rubbed his temples. So what? They're getting smarter? Amelia's hands clenched into fists. It means we're running out of time. The infected aren't just animals, they're becoming something else. More dangerous, more relentless. Louise frowned, glancing at the hastily drawn diagrams and notes. Is there anything in here about how to stop it? Sarah shook her head. Not yet. But there's something else, a mention of an experimental serum. It was never tested fully, but it was designed to slow the mutation process. If we can find the lab where it was made, we might have a chance. The group exchanged wary glances. The lab was rumored to be in the outskirts of town, inside the old university's science building, a place overrun with infected long ago. Amelia stood. We need to go there. Tonight. Rachel swallowed hard. That place, it's like a death trap. Maybe, Amelia admitted, but if we want to win this fight, we have to take risks. The survivors spent the day preparing, gathering weapons, packing supplies, and rehearsing their plan. Fear was thick in the air, but beneath it was something stronger, resolve. As night fell, the group slipped into the shadows, moving quietly through the desolate streets. The city around them was a graveyard of memories, burned-out cars, shattered windows, and silent homes. Every step was a reminder of what they had lost. The university loomed ahead, a hulking structure scarred by time and decay. The science building was the worst hit, broken glass, collapsed walls, and the ever-present groans of the infected lurking just beyond. Marcus led the way, crowbar in hand, prying open a side entrance. Inside, the stale air smelled of mold and chemicals. The group moved carefully through the darkened halls, flashlights piercing the gloom. Old research posters peeled from the walls, and overturned desks blocked their path. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from the shadows. Amelia raised her bat, signaling for silence. They pressed against the walls as a group of infected shuffled past, grotesque and hungry. Once the danger passed, they pressed on, following Sarah's directions deeper into the building. At last, they reached the lab, its door locked tight, but rusted with age. Marcus forced it open with a grunt, and they stepped inside. The room was frozen in time, rows of test tubes, broken computers, and a single refrigeration unit humming faintly in the corner. Sarah rushed to the fridge, pulling open the door. Inside were several small vials, glowing faintly under the flickering light. This must be it, she whispered, carefully removing one vial and slipping it into her bag. A sudden noise behind them made everyone spin. From the shadows stepped a man, tattered clothes, wild eyes, but unmistakably human. Who are you? Amelia demanded, raising her bat. The man's voice was hoarse. Name's Dr. Keller. I was part of the research team. I stayed here, hoping to finish what we started. Rachel took a step forward. Are you telling the truth? Can we trust you? Dr. Keller's gaze flickered. I don't have much time. The serum can slow the infection's spread in humans. But it's not a cure. We need to distribute it quickly before the virus mutates again. Marcus crossed his arms. Why didn't you come with us before? Keller's eyes darkened. Because I was afraid. And because the infected are closing in. Amelia studied him for a moment, weighing the risk. We don't have a choice, she said finally. If what you say is true, we have to try. The group hurried back through the building, now guided by Dr. Keller's knowledge. Their footsteps echoed loudly, alerting nearby infected. Groans rose from every corner as they sprinted through the hallways, barely escaping a pack that lunged at them with furious hunger. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp. The group paused to catch their breath. Keller looked at Amelia. "We'll need a secure place to test and distribute the serum." Amelia nodded. "We'll make the community center our base. Everyone who can fight will help." The survivors returned home with new hope but also a heavy burden. The virus was evolving, the enemy growing stronger, and the battle for dead America was far from over. But now, armed with knowledge and a chance to fight back, these ordinary people were becoming the heroes their world desperately needed. The cold night had settled over Miller's Creek like a shroud as the survivors returned to their community center, carrying with them the fragile hope of a serum that might slow the deadly virus. The building, battered but standing, was their last refuge, and soon, it would become a frontline laboratory. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Amelia gathered the group around the table once more, the vial of serum glowing faintly in Sarah's trembling hands. "We don't have much," Sarah said. "Just a few doses." Louise frowned. "Who do we give it to first?" Amelia's eyes scanned the tired faces around her. "The strongest fighters. Those who can hold the line while we figure out a way to make more." Marcus nodded. "We need to make sure the infected don't overwhelm us before the serum can help." Outside, the groans of the undead drifted through the night like a constant, grim reminder of the enemy closing in. The survivors worked quickly, setting up a makeshift lab in the back room. Sarah, with Dr. Keller's guidance, prepared the serum doses carefully. Meanwhile, Marcus and Luis organized patrols, strengthening the barricades and setting new traps along the perimeter. Rachel paced nervously, her mind racing with doubts and fears. What if this doesn't work? What if we're just delaying the inevitable? Amelia put a hand on her shoulder. Then we fight harder. We don't give up. Not now. The first test came when Paul, the bitten survivor they had rescued, showed signs of the infection advancing rapidly. Sarah injected the serum, watching closely as Paul's fever broke and his breathing steadied. A collective breath was held. Hours passed. Then, a flicker of life returned to Paul's eyes, a clarity that had been absent since his bite. A cheer broke out among the survivors, a small victory in a war filled with darkness. But that hope was quickly shattered. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the building's front entrance. The infected were attacking. Marcus shouted, "To your posts. They're breaching the barricades." The survivors scrambled, grabbing weapons and rushing to defend their home. Outside, the undead pressed against the barricades, their hunger relentless. Flames erupted as Luis ignited a trail of gasoline, forcing the creatures back, but not for long. Amelia fought fiercely, swinging her bat with precise blows, each strike buying precious seconds. Rachel, despite her fear, fired a makeshift crossbow, picking off the infected one by one. The battle was brutal and unforgiving. The survivors' energy drained as waves of undead crashed against their defenses. Inside the lab, Sarah worked frantically to prepare more serum, hands shaking with exhaustion. "We can't hold much longer," Marcus shouted, blood trickling down his arm from a shallow cut. Amelia's mind raced. "We need a plan." Luis pointed toward the roof. "There's a water tower nearby. If we can lure them there, maybe we can collapse it." "Risky," Marcus warned. "But it might be our best shot." Amelia made the decision. "Rachel and I will draw their attention. The rest of you prepare to pull the lever on the tower's supports." As night deepened, Amelia and Rachel slipped out into the smoky street, making noise and flashing lights to bait the infected away from the barricades. The creatures snarled, following the movement like predators closing in on prey. Back at the community center, Marcus and Luis moved swiftly to the water tower's base, using ropes and levers scavenged earlier. With a final, coordinated effort, the tower creaked and groaned before crashing down in a thunderous roar, sending a wave of water and debris through the street. The infected were swept away, disoriented but not destroyed. Amelia and Rachel dashed back to safety, soaked but alive. The survivors cheered, but the victory was tempered by losses. Several had fallen during the battle, and the virus continued to claim more. Dr. Keller looked grim. The serum works, but it's a temporary fix. We need to find a way to mass-produce it. Amelia nodded, determination burning in her eyes. Then that's our next mission. The last stand in Dead America was far from over. But for the first time in months, the survivors felt the faintest spark of hope that ordinary people could become heroes, even in the darkest of times. The sun's first pale light seeped through the cracked windows of the community center, casting long shadows across the war-weary faces gathered inside. The night's battle had left the survivors shaken but alive, and the serum, though scarce, had proven a glimmer of hope. But hope came with a price. As Amelia and her group sat around the table, Dr. Keller laid out a plan that could change everything, or doom them all. There's an old pharmaceutical factory about 20 miles from here, Keller explained, eyes flickering with cautious optimism. It used to manufacture vaccines and medications. If we can get in and access the equipment, we might be able to produce the serum in bulk. Luis leaned forward. Sounds too good to be true. What's the catch? Keller's face darkened. The factory was shut down years ago, and after the outbreak, it was overrun. Worse, it's rumored to be controlled by a group of hostile survivors, people who've turned to violence to survive. Getting in won't be easy. Marcus tightened his jaw. So it's infected and hostile humans? We're stuck between two fires. Amelia nodded. Then we have to be smarter. We'll need a plan and the right team. The survivors spent the day preparing for the next mission. Tensions ran high as they debated strategies and gathered supplies. Rachel found herself sitting apart, staring at the wall. The weight of loss, fear, and responsibility pressed down on her. She felt like a stranger in a world she no longer recognized. Sarah sat beside her quietly. You're not alone, Rachel. None of us are. Rachel nodded, wiping away a tear. I just don't know if I can do this. Sarah smiled gently. You're stronger than you think. We all are. As evening fell, the team set out, their footsteps echoing in the empty streets. The journey to the factory was treacherous, streets littered with abandoned cars, broken glass, and lurking dangers. The silence was broken only by the crunch of gravel underfoot and distant groans that kept the group alert. When the factory came into view, it was a hulking shadow against the night sky, its broken windows like empty eyes staring into nothingness. Amelia signaled the group to halt. Stay sharp. We don't know what's waiting inside. The survivors slipped inside through a side entrance Keller had identified on an old map. The interior was vast and eerily quiet, filled with rusted machinery and empty shelves. As they moved deeper, the faint sound of voices echoed, a heated argument. Marcus motioned for the group to hide behind a row of crates. Peering around the corner, they saw a group of survivors armed with makeshift weapons, guarding the main lab. One of the guards, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, barked orders. We don't want any trouble. But we're ready to defend this place. Amelia stepped forward slowly, hands raised. We don't want trouble. We need the equipment inside to help fight the infection. We're all survivors here. The scarred man's eyes narrowed. Survivors or not, this place is ours. No outsiders. Tension crackled in the stale air. The possibility of violence was thick. Dr. Keller stepped forward, voice calm but firm. If we can work together, we can save more lives. The serum can slow the infection. We need your help. The man hesitated, then barked a sharp laugh. You think we're just going to trust strangers? You're lucky we're not shooting you on sight. Amelia took a deep breath. We don't have time for more enemies. Let's talk. The man's eyes flickered with something unreadable before he nodded reluctantly. Fine. But any sign of betrayal, and you'll regret it. A fragile alliance was born, uneasy and tense. Together, the two groups worked through the night, assessing the factory's damaged equipment and mapping out a plan for production. But the peace was fragile. In the shadows, another threat watched. The infected were not idle, drawn by the noise and human presence. Suddenly, alarms blared through the factory as groans echoed from the outer walls. The survivors scrambled to their weapons. "The infected are coming," Luis shouted. "We have to hold them off." The factory's halls became a battlefield. The survivors fought desperately, blocking corridors and defending key choke points. Amelia found herself back-to-back with the scarred leader, fighting off a relentless wave. "Looks like we're in this together," he grunted. Amelia nodded, grimacing as she swung her bat. "For now." Hours passed like an eternity. When the last infected fell, silence returned, heavy, and filled with the cost of survival. As dawn broke, the survivors gathered, battered but alive. "We can make the serum here," Sarah said, exhaustion heavy in her voice. "But we need to be ready. This fight is far from over." Amelia looked out over the broken city skyline. The road ahead was dangerous and uncertain. But one thing was clear. In dead America, even ordinary people could become heroes. The early morning light spilled through the cracked factory windows, illuminating dust particles that danced in the stale air. The survivors were already at work, their hands shaking from exhaustion but driven by a desperate determination. This factory was more than rusted metal and broken machinery, it was their last hope. Sarah moved quickly between the machines, attempting to revive the equipment that would allow them to produce the serum in larger quantities. Her fingers traced over faded labels and flickering control panels as she whispered prayers to a world that seemed to have forgotten them. "Almost there," she muttered, a flicker of hope shining in her eyes. Outside, Amelia stood guard with Marcus and Luis, eyes scanning the distant tree-line. The fight had pushed them to the edge, and they all knew it wouldn't be long before the infected returned. The constant threat hung over them like a storm cloud, heavy and inevitable. Suddenly, a faint noise echoed in the distance, the unmistakable crunch of footsteps on broken glass. Amelia's hand went to her weapon. "They're coming." The group sprang into action, barricading entrances and preparing for the onslaught. The tension was electric, every second stretching into an eternity. Rachel steadied her breath, clutching her crossbow tightly. "I'm ready." Hours later, the infected attacked in a relentless wave. Their groans filled the factory halls as they surged forward, driven by hunger and instinct. The survivors fought fiercely, their weapons clashing against the undead. Amelia swung her bat with precision, Marcus fired his rifle from a window, and Luis threw makeshift explosives to keep the creatures at bay. Inside the lab, Sarah worked frantically to finish the serum batch, sweat dripping down her brow. She could hear the battle raging just beyond the door, every crash and shout pushing her to work faster. Finally, the machine whirred to life, pumping out vials of the precious serum. A cheer erupted among the survivors, but there was no time to celebrate. The infected were breaking through the barricades. Amelia's voice cut through the chaos. "Get the serum to the fighters. We have to hold them off." Rachel darted through the smoke and debris, passing out vials to those still able to fight. The serum was their lifeline, and every dose counted. As the battle raged, a sudden explosion shook the building. Flames lit the walls, smoke filling the air with a choking haze. "Fire!" Luis shouted, eyes wide with panic. "We need to get out." Amelia grabbed Rachel's arm. "Fall back. Regroup outside." The survivors fled through the burning factory, coughing and gasping as smoke choked their lungs. Behind them, the building began to collapse, the inferno consuming what little hope remained inside. Outside, they gathered, watching helplessly as their only source of the serum burned to ash. Tears streaked down Rachel's face. All that work, gone. Amelia's jaw tightened. "We'll find another way. We have to." Dr. Keller stepped forward, voice grim but resolute. "There's a research facility north of here. It might have the resources we need. But it's farther and even more dangerous." The survivors exchanged exhausted glances. The road ahead was darker than ever. Yet, even as the shadows closed in, a fierce light burned within them, the unyielding spirit of those who refused to give up. In dead America, heroes were forged not in comfort, but in the crucible of despair. And their last stand was just beginning. The survivors gathered their few remaining supplies under the gray dawn sky, the weight of loss pressing down on them like a physical burden. The factory, once their beacon of hope, was now a smoldering ruin behind them. Yet, despite the devastation, they refused to surrender. Amelia stood at the front of the group, her eyes scanning the horizon where the road stretched northward, toward the research facility Dr. Keller had mentioned. It was a place whispered about with a mix of hope and fear. Rumors said it was a fortress of science, but also a maze of dangers. "We move fast," Amelia said firmly. "The sooner we reach it, the better our chances." The group set out, their footsteps heavy but purposeful. Rachel walked beside Amelia, her fingers still trembling from the chaos of the fire. "Do you think we'll find what we need there?" she asked quietly. Amelia glanced at her, forcing a small smile. "We have to believe it." The journey was grueling. They navigated crumbling highways and deserted towns, each corner hiding new threats, infected lurking in shadows, rival survivors driven mad by desperation. One evening, as the sun dipped behind twisted trees, they camped in the ruins of an old gas station. Marcus kept watch, eyes sharp even in exhaustion. Luis scouted the perimeter, his every movement cautious. Around the dying campfire, the survivors shared stories, fragments of lives before the world ended, memories that reminded them of who they once were. Sarah, exhausted but determined, spoke softly, "We're not just fighting to survive. We're fighting to remember." The next day brought rain, cold and relentless, soaking through their clothes and chilling them to the bone. Morale wavered, but Amelia's resolve never faltered. When they finally reached the outskirts of the research facility, a towering complex surrounded by high fences and barbed wire, a new challenge awaited. The gates were locked tight, and signs warned of dangers both inside and out. Dr. Keller examined the structure carefully. "There's a service entrance on the east side. It's not heavily guarded, but the interior is a maze." Amelia nodded. "We move in fast and quiet. No mistakes." Inside, the facility was a labyrinth of sterile corridors and darkened labs. The faint hum of forgotten machines echoed through the halls. As they searched for supplies, whispers of past experiments and hurried evacuations seemed to cling to the walls. Suddenly, a faint noise, a shuffling step, echoed down a nearby hallway. The survivors froze. From the shadows emerged not just infected, but something different, more aggressive, more cunning. Amelia's heart pounded. They've evolved. The battle that followed was fierce and desperate. The survivors fought with every ounce of strength, pushing deeper into the facility despite injuries and fatigue. At last, in a secured lab, Sarah found what they had been searching for: advanced equipment and supplies to produce the serum in mass quantities. But the moment was short-lived. The alarms blared, and the facility's defenses kicked in, locking down doors and sealing exits. "We're trapped," Luis said, eyes wide with alarm. Amelia's mind raced. "We have the supplies, but we need a way out." Marcus spotted a maintenance tunnel map near the control panel. "There, if we can reach it, it might lead outside." The survivors prepared for one final push through the dark, twisting tunnels beneath the facility. Every step echoed with the weight of their struggle, a desperate race against time and the ever-present threat of death. Outside, the night closed in, silent and unforgiving. Inside, ordinary people were fighting to become heroes, holding the line against the rising threat and dead America's last stand. Ready for Part 10 to finish the story? Just let me know. Part 10, Dawn of a New Hope. The tunnels beneath the research facility were cold, dark, and claustrophobic. Every step the survivors took echoed ominously against the concrete walls, mixing with the distant groans of the infected hunting above. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of decay. Amelia led the group, heart pounding but steady, every sense alert. The vials of serum nestled safely in Rachel's pack were their most precious cargo, proof that hope could still be forged in the darkest places. "Stay close," Amelia whispered. "We're almost out." Marcus scanned the shadows, rifle raised. "We can't afford any surprises." Luis brought up the rear, making sure no one was left behind. Sarah moved beside Amelia, clutching a small medical kit, ready to patch up any wounds. The tunnel twisted sharply, and suddenly a loud crash echoed from behind them. The hostile evolved infected had found their way in. "They're here!" Rachel hissed, pulling her crossbow into position. The survivors braced themselves as the creatures lunged from the darkness, faster, smarter, more brutal than any they had faced. The fight was frantic. Amelia swung her bat with precision, Marcus fired steadily, and Luis hurled improvised explosives, lighting up the tunnel in brief bursts of fiery chaos. In the confusion, Rachel stumbled, dropping a vial. It shattered on the cold floor. "No!" she cried, breath catching in her throat. Amelia dove forward, grabbing Rachel and pulling her out of the path of another attack. "We can't lose hope now." With renewed determination, the group fought their way forward, finally reaching a rusted ladder leading up to a hatch. Marcus pried it open, and a rush of fresh air hit them. They scrambled out into the early morning light, blinking against the brightness. Behind them, the facility loomed, silent once again. The fight had ended, for now. Outside, the survivors took a moment to catch their breath. The sky was tinged with the soft pinks and golds of dawn, a new day in a broken world. Sarah examined the serum supplies, her hands steady despite the ordeal. "We have enough here to start production. If we can get this to the safe zone, we can save lives." Amelia looked around at the tired, beaten faces of her group, ordinary people who had become heroes through sheer will and sacrifice. "We made it," she said softly. "But this is just the beginning." They began to trek back, careful and watchful, but with a spark of hope ignited in their hearts. The road was long and dangerous, but now they carried with them the means to fight back, to reclaim a future from the ashes. As they moved through the ruins of dead America, their story would be remembered, not just for the battles fought, but for the courage found in ordinary people. In the face of darkness, they stood together. And in that unity, they found their last stand was truly a new beginning. If you'd like, I can help you with more stories, or even develop this story further into other formats or spin-offs.